In a league already under fire for inconsistent officiating, what happened to Sophie Cunningham during the Fever's latest clash with the Seattle Storm has sparked a new wave of outrage and a serious question. Was this payback? Late in the second half, Cunningham grabbed a routine defensive rebound, pivoted calmly, and just as the play was moving up court, she was violently body slammed by a Seattle player in full view of the official standing just feet away. There was no whistle, no stoppage, not even a glance of concern from the referees. The arena went quiet until Caitlin Clark, watching from the bench, due to her ongoing groin injury, snapped. "You were right in front of her," she shouted across the court, her frustration boiling over after weeks of what many Fever fans believe is targeted negligence. Cunningham didn't stay down long, but the message many saw in that moment wasn't just about one missed foul. This was the same Sophie Cunningham who just weeks ago went viral for calling out WNBA referees publicly, accusing them of letting the league's stars get physically punished without protection. The same Sophie who's been Clark's loudest on-court defender, and perhaps now, the latest example of what happens when you challenge the system. Was this officiating failure just another chapter in the WNBA's growing officiating? To understand just how we got to this point, the moment where Sophie Cunningham is violently dropped to the hardwood with no whistle and Caitlin Clark is screaming at officials from the bench, you have to rewind. Because this moment wasn't born out of nowhere. It's been brewing, building with every missed call, every eyebrow-raising no whistle, and every time a star player in a Fever jersey took contact that would have drawn a foul anywhere else. This is the backdrop behind what played out against Seattle, and it's why the silence from the referees that night hit like a thunderclap. Sophie Cunningham, now in her 6th WNBA season, has been increasingly vocal about what she sees as a pattern of bias in officiating, and not just toward her, but toward the Indiana Fever in general. That stance didn't go unnoticed. She's been fined, mocked, and in some corners of the league, clearly targeted. Her podcast recently launched, with media personality Wes Wilson pulled no punches. She spoke openly about how teams game plan to rough up Caitlin Clark. She revealed locker room conversations from her former team, the Phoenix Mercury, that included comments like, "Let's show her what the W really is." And when those comments went viral, Cunningham didn't backtrack. She doubled down, becoming the de facto voice for a growing number of players and fans who believe officiating in the WNBA is broken. Caitlin Clark's journey through that same firestorm has been even more public. Since the day she was drafted, she's been both the league's brightest star and its most frequent target. Statistically, Clark has taken more hard contact per game than any other rookie in recent memory. She's been shoved off the ball, elbowed mid-drive, leveled on screens, much of it either ignored or ruled incidental by the officials. And now, sidelined with a lingering groin injury believed to stem from cumulative soft tissue trauma, she's forced to watch the same treatment being dished out to the teammate who's been most loudly advocating for her. Which brings us back to Saturday's game. Clark in street clothes, Cunningham taking on a larger role with Clark unavailable, and the Fever locked in a tight contest with a playoff-contending Seattle Storm. The crowd was electric. The stakes were high. Cunningham pulled down a defensive rebound cleanly, began turning up court, and then boom, hit the floor hard after being bodied by a Seattle player. The camera caught everything. So did the referee. But the whistle never came. In isolation, maybe that's just a bad missed call. But when placed against the broader backdrop, the podcast criticisms, the TikTok fine, the rising tensions over how Clark has been treated, the lack of a whistle feels impossible to ignore. It felt like a message. Whether intentional or not, that's how it's being received. Across social media, fans were quick to ask, was this retaliation for Sophie speaking up? Was this what happens when a player challenges the league's power structure? Because here's the thing, this wasn't just a hard foul. It was exactly the kind of play Cunningham has been warning about. The kind that isn't called. The kind that leads to injury. The kind that gets overlooked when it happens to certain teams, or more specifically, certain players. The kind that's turning fans away and drawing media scrutiny. The kind that, when paired with silence from officials, starts to feel less like incompetence and more like intent. And maybe that's what lit the fire under Clark that night. Maybe that's why, despite being on the bench, nursing an injury, she leapt up and began shouting, The frustration was raw, the betrayal unmistakable. She's lived through this all season. Now she was watching it happen to the one teammate who's had her back. Only this time, again, no one in stripes did a thing. The blowback from this incident was immediate, and not just from fans on social media. Within minutes of Sophie Cunningham hitting the floor, sports commentators, analysts, and even former players began chiming in. But this wasn't just about one collision or one missed call anymore. This was about a growing league-wide frustration with how officiating is shaping, not just influencing, but shaping the outcome of games and the safety of players. And once again, it was happening on national television, in front of millions of viewers, and at the expense of one of the league's most outspoken voices. The most troubling part? Cunningham has been here before. She's been outspoken, fined, shoved, and mocked for it. Her criticisms aired most publicly through her viral podcast. Moments have repeatedly centered on the lack of accountability among WNBA referees. And while her delivery may be unfiltered, the core of her message has remained the same. Players aren't being protected. Not her, not Caitlin Clark, and certainly not anyone who wears an Indiana Fever jersey. The pattern, when viewed in totality, has become harder and harder to ignore. A string of high-profile, high-contact incidents involving Clark earlier this season raised eyebrows, shoulder checks with no whistle, hand-to-the-face fouls deemed common, and groin injuries now confirmed to be keeping her sidelined, game after game. Now, that same pattern has enveloped Cunningham. 2 vocal players, 2 targets, 0 accountability. That connection is what's fueling speculation about retaliation. Because this isn't just happening in isolation anymore. It's happening amid fines, criticisms, and a public campaign to demand better. Cunningham herself was penalized $500 just weeks ago for posting a sarcastic TikTok video mocking the league's officiating standards. And while that clip racked up over 1 million views, it also landed her squarely in the league's crosshairs. Her popularity grew, but so did the scrutiny. So when Sophie was slammed to the hardwood, and the referee stood motionless just feet away, it wasn't hard to understand why Caitlin Clark erupted from the bench. Her reaction wasn't random. It was a boiling point. She's been targeted herself. She's seen the bruises. She's watched game tape where the contact was blatant and the silence deafening. And now, the one teammate who's consistently gone to bat for her was on the receiving end of the same treatment. Make no mistake, this wasn't a basketball play. It wasn't a 50-50th ball or incidental contact. It was a clear, excessive hit off the rebound, away from the basket and with full view of the officials. The kind of moment where even the most distracted fan in the arena knows to expect a whistle. But none came. Instead, play continued. Sophie picked herself up, and the game marched on like nothing happened. And yet, the implications were massive. Because it wasn't just the physicality of the play that made it problematic. It was the context, the timing, the optics. This wasn't a rookie getting tangled in a hustle play. This was a veteran, an outspoken critic of officiating, suddenly subjected to one of the hardest uncalled hits of the season. And the referee, a few feet away, eyes on the play. No reaction. That's why the conversation has shifted. It's no longer just about protection, it's about perception. What message does it send when a player is allowed to be hit like that, with no consequence, just weeks after she challenged the very referees responsible for ensuring fair play? What does it tell fans, or worse, other players, about what happens when you speak up? As social media erupted, with fans demanding answers and commentators struggling to justify the non-call, the moment quickly became emblematic of a much deeper issue, not just in Indiana, not just for Cunningham, but across the entire league. By the time the fourth quarter clock began ticking down, the intensity in Gainbridge Fieldhouse was no longer just about the scoreboard. The real drama was unfolding off-ball, in body language, in sideline tension, and in the reaction from the Indiana bench. One moment had changed the tone of the night entirely. Sophie Cunningham getting slammed to the court without so much as a glance from the referee. And while the scoreboard still showed a Fever advantage, the psychological shift was undeniable. You could see it in the players' faces. This wasn't just a fight to win the game. This had become a test of composure, pride, and restraint. Caitlin Clark, still dressed in game-ready warm-ups, but chained to the bench due to her lingering groin injury, was visibly shaken. Not because she feared the outcome of the match, but because she recognized something much deeper happening. A precedent being set. When one of your own takes a hit like that, and there's no whistle, no discussion, no review, only silence, it becomes crystal clear that the rules don't apply evenly. Clark's outrage, caught by sideline cameras and amplified on social media, wasn't performative. It was personal. She knows what it's like to be ignored when the contact gets too real. And now, she was watching her teammate face the same. Meanwhile, Sophie Cunningham, who had just hit the deck seconds earlier, bounced back up without protest, but you could see the steam in her eyes, not in frustration at the opposing player, not even at the officials, but at the system. This was a player who had publicly taken heat for calling out referees, just weeks earlier fined for a sarcastic social media jab at the league's inconsistency. Now she was living out the very criticism that cost her $500. And the arena knew it. The fans knew it. The broadcast team knew it. It wasn't subtle. It was screaming. This moment, a no-call so blatant that it transcended the usual social media rage, exploded across every major WNBA platform within minutes. Clips of the foul were replayed on repeat, and the hashtags came flying in. Number protect our players, number justice for Sophie, or WNBA refs. Even national outlets outside of the sports bubble picked it up. One sports radio caller referred to it as the single most embarrassing missed call in modern WNBA history. Another labeled it the moment Cunningham went from enforcer to martyr. But what makes this moment the undeniable turning point isn't just the silence from the referees, it's the reaction from the Fever themselves. Head coach Stephanie White was animated, more animated than we've seen her in weeks. Her sideline pacing was no longer strategic, it was agitated. She exchanged words with the fourth official. She was clearly biting back something stronger, something she likely knew would cost her more than a technical if she let it fly. Cunningham stayed in the game, focused, shooting lights out from deep in a show of mental resilience that many called heroic after the fact. And Caitlin Clark? She sat stone-faced for the rest of the quarter, only breaking her silence to give subtle encouragement to teammates as the lead began to slip. Because here's the other piece of it. This wasn't just a night of bad officiating. It was nearly a collapse. The Fever, who had been up by double digits, suddenly found themselves clinging to a one-point lead. The Storm smelled blood. The home crowd grew quiet, and with every missed shot and every turnover, it felt like the referee's no call had not just injured Sophie's pride, but infected the team's momentum. Yet it's in this swirling storm that we witness something incredible. Sophie Cunningham didn't fold. In fact, she elevated. She knocked down a critical three from the wing with just under 2 minutes to play, stopping the Storm's run cold. And when Indiana needed someone to chase down a long rebound in the final 45 seconds, it was Cunningham who did it. Body still bruised, composure unshaken. That's when the crowd came back to life. Not for a dunk, not for a flashy highlight, but for a woman who had been body slammed, ignored, and still managed to deliver. In the immediate aftermath of Sophie Cunningham being thrown to the floor, the dust may have settled on the court, but the emotional aftershocks rippled far beyond Gainbridge Fieldhouse. The Fever may have escaped with a narrow victory over Seattle, but for many watching in the stands, on broadcasts, and across social media, it didn't feel like a win. It felt like a warning that even in the most watched, most discussed WNBA season in years, officiating standards still appear to lag miles behind the moment. Fans weren't just upset, they were incensed. And this time, it wasn't just the typical noise of online discourse. Prominent analysts, former players, and even coaches began raising alarm bells. The league's credibility, already wobbling from weeks of officiating controversies, had taken yet another public hit. But the story doesn't stop with the headlines. On the Fever bench, the mood was far more complex. Caitlin Clark's body language spoke volumes. Despite her injury, she had been emotionally locked in from the moment the game tipped off, cheering on teammates and vocally supporting Cunningham until that pivotal moment. After the no call, her tone shifted. She stopped clapping. Her jaw clenched. Every time a referee walked past the bench, her eyes followed. It was as if she'd been forced to relive her own experiences all over again, only now through the lens of her teammate. The silence from the officiating crew cut deeper than any contact on the court. It told Clark and the Fever, "You're on your own out here." For Cunningham, the immediate response was professionalism. No outburst, no retaliation. but her frustration was visible. Her post-game demeanor was cool, but distant. When asked by reporters if she felt the foul should have been called, she sidestepped, choosing not to escalate the issue further. But for those familiar with her recent media appearances, the message was clear between the lines. Just weeks ago, she had made headlines calling out the league's referees for inconsistent treatment of star players, particularly Clark. She had taken a public stand, even at the cost of a league-issued fine, and now that stance had boomeranged back onto her. What had once been an abstract argument about fairness had now become a lived experience, and every Fever player knew it. The consequences of the no call weren't just emotional, they were strategic. That moment of disruption shifted the game's momentum. Indiana, previously playing with rhythm and control, suddenly looked hesitant. Passes were rushed, shots were taken too early in the clock. There was a visible anxiety in the offense, almost as if the players were anticipating another missed call at any moment, and that anxiety was well-founded. As the fourth quarter progressed, Seattle closed the gap dramatically. A game that should have been wrapped up in the third suddenly became a coin toss. Stephanie White's decision-making also came under scrutiny. Fans online questioned her delay in bringing in defensive specialist Lexi Hull to help stop the Storm's late run. Some wondered whether the team had been too focused on surviving emotionally rather than making tactical adjustments. And while the Fever eventually managed to pull out the win, the narrow margin only highlighted how much damage that single moment had caused, not just to the scoreboard, but to team morale. Meanwhile, the reaction from the league has been, at best, muted. No official statement, no retroactive review, no disciplinary action, just more silence. And that silence is quickly becoming a problem, because it's not just Indiana raising concerns anymore. All across the league, players and coaches are beginning to speak up. Las Vegas guard Kelsey Plum has already vented her frustration about inconsistent whistleblowing. Other teams are keeping tabs. Everyone's watching. And while some might interpret Cunningham's fall as just another hard playoff foul, many others are wondering if this was something more. A quiet payback for her outspoken criticism? A message being sent through inaction? That's the real consequence here. Not just the bruise on Cunningham's elbow or the scare to her teammates. The bigger cost is trust. Trust in the referees. Trust in the system. Trust in the idea that the WNBA is finally ready to take the next step as a professional league. When a player can be hit that hard, that obviously, with no call and no accountability, it undermines everything the league has been working to build. Momentum, fan engagement, player safety, all of it is jeopardized when games appear to be decided not just by talent and coaching, but by inconsistency and silence. The ramifications of the Sophie Cunningham incident and Caitlin Clark's fiery response from the bench extend far beyond a single game. This isn't just about one missed foul or even one player being targeted. What we're seeing now is a growing erosion of confidence in the WNBA's infrastructure. And at the heart of that crisis is the refereeing. It's not just Cunningham or Clark anymore. Players across the league are quietly, and sometimes not so quietly, acknowledging that something isn't right. Inconsistency in officiating has gone from a nuisance to a defining storyline of the season. The problem is no longer just about player safety. It's about the credibility of the league itself. Let's be clear. The WNBA is undergoing a historic moment. Ratings are climbing, merchandise is flying off shelves, and new fans are tuning in thanks to the rising visibility of star players like Caitlin Clark, A'ja Wilson, and Angel Reese. But with that growth comes expectation. Expectation that the product, the on-court experience, reflects the professionalism and legitimacy the league has been fighting for since its inception. And when referees allow high-contact, dangerous plays to go unpunished, especially against the league's most marketable names, it sends a deeply troubling message. That message? Star power won't protect you, and voicing concern might actually make you a target. Take Sophie Cunningham's case. Prior to the body slams seen across social media, she had already made waves with a now viral TikTok calling out referee inconsistencies. For that, the league fined her $500, a relatively small amount, but one that carries a much larger symbolic weight. It told players, "Criticize us, and there will be consequences." Now, fast forward to the next major game, she's on the floor, gets violently thrown down, and nothing is called. No flagrant, no technical, no review. How can fans, coaches, or even players ignore the optics of that sequence? It's created a new kind of tension, not between rival teams, but between players and the very system they play within. Can you trust the officials to protect you? Can you speak your mind without retribution? Can you rely on calls to be fair in the clutch? For the WNBA to keep evolving into a truly mainstream product, these questions need answers, and fast. Because while the passion of athletes and the loyalty of fans are driving the league's success, they are also fragile. All it takes is one or two high-profile moments like this to erode years of trust. There's also the matter of perception. Basketball is not just a sport, it's a brand, it's a narrative. And in the digital era, narratives travel fast. When fans see the league's brightest stars getting battered without consequence, it doesn't just spark outrage, it impacts future engagement. New viewers are watching with fresh eyes, expecting fairness, athleticism, and professionalism. Instead, they're watching clips of egregious no-calls, players fuming on the sidelines, and coaches walking a tightrope in post-game pressers to avoid fines. These aren't growing pains. These are warning signs. Moreover, this officiating crisis couldn't come at a worse time. With playoff races heating up and every game carrying postseason implications, players are not only battling each other, but also bracing for how the referees might impact the outcome. One questionable call could mean the difference between home court advantage or an early exit, and that's simply not acceptable for a league trying to showcase its competitive depth. But the most damaging long-term issue is how this all affects the internal culture of the WNBA. Players like Cunningham, who are stepping into leadership roles, are being penalized for doing what the league claims to support: speaking out, standing up, and fighting for fairness. This isn't just about Caitlin Clark or Sophie Cunningham anymore. This is about whether the WNBA truly supports its athletes when it counts, not just in press releases or promo campaigns, but on the court where it matters. Until then, the question looms: was what happened to Sophie Cunningham just another hard playoff foul, or something more? Fans are asking, analysts are debating, and if the league doesn't respond soon, they may find that the story no longer belongs to them, but to the voices rising louder every day, demanding justice, transparency, and change. As this storm of outrage cools and the scoreboard settles, what remains is a crystal clear truth. The WNBA stands at a crossroads. That moment when Sophie Cunningham was slammed to the hardwood, falling silently through the cracks of officiating, wasn't just a missed call. It was a signal of a deeper breakdown in league accountability. And what makes it so pivotal isn't the contact, it's the system's stingy response. Referees allowed a dangerous act to happen. Public reaction erupted, and yet, the only things left echoing through the arena were boos, replay reels, and a fan base demanding answers. Now, the question isn't just what just happened, it's what happens next. The Fever got the win, but at what cost? For coaches, it's now about keeping players focused while trust in officiating erodes. For league leadership, it's about confronting a pattern, one that's eroding confidence during the highest profile season in WNBA history. For players, it's about reckoning with an environment where being outspoken may come with risk, but silence doesn't bring safety. And for fans, it's a test of loyalty when the league's product feels compromised by institutional inconsistency. But amid the wreckage, there's also clarity. This can be a turning point, a moment where the league says enough is enough, where rules are enforced evenly, players are protected, and voices advocating for fairness are elevated, not sidelined. It's a chance to reaffirm that the WNBA is committed to integrity, accountability, and equality. If they act now, this could be the episode that shapes a better era, not a dark stain. So, what's next for the Fever and for Sophie Cunningham? Immediate reviews, referee accountability, league dialogue, perhaps even a formal response acknowledging the breakdown, and long-term training protocols, referee education, clearer standards on protecting athletes. It's about making sure this moment, painful as it was, does not fade into our memory as another shocking highlight. Instead, let it be the spark that changes everything. What do you think? Is this the last straw, or simply another blip in the season's growing officiating crisis? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit that like button if you stand for fairness. and subscribe for more coverage that gets real. Because in the WNBA, the story doesn't end with a buzzer. It starts with the voices that demand better.